Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to our Feminist Communities for Local Food webinar. I am Talamh Beo, and I am the coordinator of the Feminist Communities for Climate Justice project, which is a joint project between the National Women's Council and Community Work Ireland. They're both national representative organisations. The National Women's Council represents women and feminist groups throughout the country, including Community Work Ireland, while Community Work Ireland represents community workers, groups, development organisations throughout the country. They're both doing this work on an all-island basis. So then the project itself is funded under the CCAP programme Strand 2, which is all about learning by doing, and it's funded by the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar. We'll be discussing the need for a new approach to food production in Ireland, including Talamh Beo's proposed local food policy, why we should eat local, in-season food, and how you can get involved in our Feminist Communities for Climate Justice national network and also the local food working group within it. We're doing this webinar in collaboration with Talamh Beo Women, who are a member of the National Women's Council, but are also members and strong supporters of the Feminist Climate Justice Project. Just to say at this point, you can keep up to date with our project by signing up to the mailing list. We will put in a wee link in the chat box. We will be doing questions and answers at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, just input them into the questions and answer function. And the webinar itself is being recorded, and you'll see that we have Irish language interpretation as well. Irish Sign Language interpretation as well, I should have said. So moving on to the next slide. This is just a run through by the minute of our agenda for this afternoon, or this evening, I should say. So yeah, we'll fly through just welcoming yous, and then we'll do an introduction on the land use and food and agriculture chapter of our Feminist Climate Justice report, which will always also input into the chat function. And then we'll be handing over to Talamh Beo Women and then heading into the questions and answers. So to introduce the project itself, and at its core, really, feminist climate justice lies, and it's all about paying attention to the gendered and intersectional characteristics of all dimensions of climate justice. So that's taken into account, you know, your race, ethnicity, your age, and your ability, and your gender, and so on. And to rewind it even further back is on climate justice. Climate justice is really about the fact that while we're reducing our carbon emissions, we need to be reducing our inequalities in society as well, and leaving no one behind. We need to do this all for the many, not for the few. So briefly on the project, it's really about highlighting the disproportionate impacts of the climate crisis on women and marginalised communities. And we mean women in their full diversity. So that's disabled women, traveller women, migrants, rural women, and the list continues. So the project's about amplifying the voices of those people most impacted by the climate crisis. We're advocating and influencing policy on both local and national level, co-creating and collaborating on submissions in response to some of these plans and policies that are being drafted up. We're mobilising communities, and that's through our national network that I've mentioned, and that will input a link for you all to join as well. And we're strengthening the capacity and raising the consciousness of those working within communities. So that's community workers as trusted individuals within their communities to disseminate this information about climate justice and a feminist community work approach to it, where we're not leaving anyone behind. And we did a certificate programme in collaboration with the Department of Applied Social Studies in Maynooth University, where we had 21 participants, and it's really a joy to see them using what they learned. And also we have one of the past CERT participants on this call today, Joanne, so it's really an honour to have her on the call. And you'll see a picture of all the crew there up in the top right hand corner. And we'll also be developing toolkits, and we just share everything and anything we really create, to be honest. So you'll be getting this PowerPoint post-event as well. So the project itself, it's a response to community workers. They can see the climate impacts, how it's affecting their communities, and they need, you know, the capacity, the confidence, and the information to guide them, so that they can strengthen the capacity of their communities to respond and recognise climate policies and plans and injustices that disadvantage them. It's also a response to the huge data and policy gap that exists. So existing climate policy does not adequately pay attention to the domestic gendered impacts of the climate crisis. And we're developing a feminist analysis of climate justice through this project. And also it was this project was a response to the National Women's Council's members, which is Community Work Ireland, who called for the council to integrate feminist climate justice throughout their work. So that's just a bit of background to the project. So really bringing into why women. Why are women more likely to be hardest hit by the impacts of the climate emergency? We've a few points here on the slide, but just women have lower income, less wealth than men. We have a gender pay gap, gender pension gap. Women do twice as much unpaid care work as men. And care work is truly key to how women experience their lives and how they're impacted by the climate crisis. So that means that they, all of their transport patterns, their food use, consumption, the choices that they make, their food security, energy security, all stream from their caring duties. And yeah, there's a few other points there, but I'm just going to continue on. So then, yeah, why are we taking a feminist community work approach in all that we do? And what we're doing right now, we're taking a feminist community work approach to local food. So it's about addressing and tackling the root causes of these inequalities and injustices. We want system change, not climate change. And when we're talking about systems, we're talking about capitalism, the patriarchy, colonialism. This approach cares. So we're really championing caring work, paid, unpaid, and we really want it to be valued and recognised as inherently low carbon green work, and it's truly key to our just transition. And we want to move from just mere consultation into really meaningful participation in decision-making spaces. And that's a focus on the issue of women's representation in decision-making, as well as marginalised groups and communities. So those most impacted by the climate crisis truly need to be at the centre of decision-making. And it's all about championing collective focus, getting together, and we must fight for the many, not for the few. And it also means that when we have better public services, these not only benefit just people, but they benefit the planet as well. And then coming to the Feminist Communities for Local Food Working Group, as I've mentioned, Talamh Beo, our members of the Women's Council, put forward this motion. And this is where we've got to so far. We're hosting this webinar. We've created an action group, and it's a space where we really hope yourselves as attendees will join. And yeah, collectively, we can make changes in our approach to local food here on the island of Ireland. So at this point, I'm going to hand you over to Vanessa, who quite handily is right beside me. So yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Colette, and thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. And we're going to briefly touch on some of the findings from our Feminist Climate Justice Report. Back in April, we published this report, which we carried out with the School of Applied Social Studies at UCC, so University College Cork, a great team of researchers, Fiona Duclos, Catherine Ford and Edith Bustede. This report, as you can see here, covers a number of areas and talks about numerous gaps in our climate policy when it comes to addressing inequalities in society. But today, for the purposes of this webinar, we'll just be touching on the food, land use, agriculture and biodiversity chapter, and specifically we'll be focusing on food and agriculture. So this is just a sample of the findings from this chapter. In its production and consumption, food is not gender or class neutral, and it instead harbours several persistent inequalities which have become more entrenched due to climate and weather shocks, such as and also the COVID-19 pandemic, political dysfunction, and civil unrest and displacement. So, for example, food supply shortages due to the war in Ukraine have already had a significant impact on food availability and pricing in the EU, and this has had knock-on effects for EU producers and consumers. When we're talking about the gender dimension, women struggle to achieve recognition as farmers and food producers, despite making up 16% of the Irish agriculture, fisheries and forestry workforce. And there are intersectional dimensions to this as well, to women's disadvantage. For example, migrant women who work in agriculture and food production have suffered exploitation at the hands of employers, which can be compounded by racism, discrimination, language barriers, legal status, and precarious forms of employment. We don't actually have an official indicator of food poverty in Ireland, which really shows how much attention the government is paying to this issue. We have a definition created by the ESRI, which has enabled us to measure food poverty in Ireland. And the results indicate that 8.9% of the population of Ireland experienced food poverty in 2021. Barnardo's reported that food poverty is increasing in Ireland, and nearly 1/3 of people have experienced food poverty, with many parents cutting down on portion sizes or even going without meals in order to feed their children. The groups who are most at risk of food poverty in Ireland include women, the unemployed, people who are ill or disabled, all households with children, and people at risk of poverty. And even though we do have this definition from the ESRI, it does exclude important things like the cultural dimensions of food poverty, including access to, preparing, and sharing culturally appropriate foods, particularly in the context of the direct provision system in Ireland. In 2020, women accounted for just 12% of farmers and farm workers in Ireland. And in a decade from 2010 to 2020, there was just a 1% increase in the percentage of female farm holders in Ireland. Again, this is just a small sample of the findings in the report, and it will be linked to you in the chat. We have there'll be a web PDF version of it, and there's a smaller summary size version of the report as well. But now I'm delighted to hand you over to the first of our speakers from Talamh Beo, Mary Hoy. Mary grew up on a farm and joined Talamh Beo not as a farmer, but as a citizen concerned about good quality food, and also her empathy for farmers who she feels have been getting the raw end of the stick. So Mary, I'll hand over to you.
Hi, we are delighted to be members of the National Women's Council and the Feminist Community for Climate Justice. I would like to particularly thank Colette and Vanessa for all your help and encouragement. Talamh Beo is a grassroots, member-led organisation. It is run by farmers who have direct experience of the issues they campaign on. Talamh Beo aims to have a gender-balanced membership representing a variety of farmers, growers and concerned citizens. Basically anyone who's concerned in any way about the food we eat. As our membership grows, so too does our power to bring about change that protects the well-being of the people of Ireland. We want to create a better food system where all people have access to healthy, nutritious and affordable local, chemical-free food. We want to farm in ways which benefit and restore natural ecosystems and build soils, leaving the land better than when we started. We want to show solidarity with rural communities across Ireland and the world, and ensure that living from the land and with the land continues into the future. Talamh Beo is part of the wider global organisation La Via Campesina and its European branch ECVC, who represents small to medium-sized farmers, land workers, rural women, Indigenous people and migrant farm workers, to name a few. Together we can work towards food sovereignty for all. We attend events such as the Electric Picnic, the Ploughing Championships, and conferences like Biofarm to promote our work and recruit new members. With new members, we aim to listen to them to find out where they are at and if they have skills they can bring to the table for the benefit of all. Talamh Beo have numerous working groups, as you can see here, including a local food policy group and a women's group. Our focus is on bringing feminism into agriculture, policy and programmes, and to bring our farming into balance. So, what is our current food system like, and is it working? So here I've made a list of some of the difficulties and challenges of a grower. So weather patterns and weather pattern changes caused by climate change, retaining a consistent supply for market, working 17 to 18 hours a day for a fraction of the living wage. And sometimes there's a need to price up. Complaints of food is unwashed or misshapen or wonky. Shops supply a fraction of the cost. Seasonal food not always popular. The government and sometimes organic regulations. More appreciation from people who grow their own food. Cheap food, but at what cost? What is the nutritive value and what chemicals are being used to attain that? Artificial fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides? More health issues, illnesses, more people in hospitals, and in some cases, earlier deaths. How is that beneficial to us? Who does our present system benefit? Not farmers or consumers, but big corporations, the ABCCD companies, big ag. Cracks in this system have been exposed. During COVID-19, when the Suez Canal was blocked and the COVID vaccine was delayed. What kind of food systems are we looking for? We need a just transition. That means we want production and consumption cycles holistic and waste-free, and for this transition to be just and equitable to all people. We want everyone in Ireland to have access to high-quality, locally produced food. We also want farmers to earn a fair living from providing that food into their communities. Creating pathways for local food production through a positive policy framework, which incorporates income supports, labour and finance incentives. Pilot projects for land access and short supply chain supports and infrastructure. A food system that puts people's needs before commercial needs. We need to change the long distance to short distances. Everyone should be entitled to chemical-free food. Local food is one of the solutions. Chemical-free food should not be a luxury for those who can afford it. It should be for everyone. So that's me finished, but I just want to warn you, Janet has some good news for us, and which she will tell us about later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mary. A really great contribution, despite we're going over the tech hurdles and everything. So I'd like to now introduce our second speaker, who is Polly Rowley-Sams, who has been the eco-gardener in residence and grower at Richmond Barracks Community Garden for 4 years and counting. Richmond Barracks is a building of historical importance located in Inchicore. It is home to a library, garden, and Culture Connects, a programme of cultural activities that celebrate the experiences and interests of local communities and people. The garden contains fruit trees, apple trees, pear trees, cherry trees, a beehive, vegetable and flower beds and formal beds, and a large lawn is used for gatherings and events. So, Polly, feel free to take it away.
Hello, and thank you for listening to me. As such a lovely introduction there that I don't need to introduce myself. I often talk about listening to quiet voices when I'm in the garden and also looking for invisible connections between things as well. So thank you for your listening in these next few moments. So the garden itself was built in 2016 and it's behind a building of historic importance, and it contains within it a community garden, which to me is the prime focus of my time there every day. This is a brilliant aerial shot there of the garden, and in the top right hand corner you can see there's community plots, and each of those beds are dedicated to different people. So there's families, there's individuals, and it's a very inclusive place. So we make it as welcoming as we possibly can. I think that it's interesting to work within a community garden, within a garden in a urban environment, because sometimes we might not associate those things with growing food. But as you can see here, we've got on Saturday, we have Eat the Streets, which is a brilliant festival all about how we can grow things that are tasty to eat around us in urban environments. And I think that there's a lot more similarities between people in the countryside and people in the city than we are told to believe. What else do? I am looking at teaching or imparting information with people that's useful on a really small scale and on a bigger scale. Things like making worm pipes, so doing composting that can be done on a balcony as well as on a larger bed. And the idea is that lots of small actions can improve soil and can create things that are tasty and nutritious for us all to eat. I also run a biodiversity walking tour in the area. So Inchicore, which translates as Island of the Sheep, is a small loop of a walk, and I point out and we explore the biodiversity along the canal and down Tyrconnell Road. And I always point out that there's a patchwork of different community initiatives, all looking at how we can be more sustainable, how we can grow more food, and by doing this also strengthen our systems, you know, creating more biodiversity on the planet. I think it's important to mention as well that I wonder sometimes about the idea that people in the city can't grow food or don't have knowledge of farming, because funnily enough, all the people that I've met doing the role that I have, in 1 or 2 generations, they would have been growing spuds and onions and cabbages. Even though people say, I don't know anything about growing food, invariably they do. So I think that's a wonderful thing. It's not too far away for us. We can connect back into that, and we can bring that knowledge up to speed, so we can have healthy, varied diets. And of course, the more varied the diets are, the better our mood is, the better the mood of our children, the more that everyone can concentrate. So I'm all for advocating for healthy, locally grown food. And yeah, you're all very welcome to come and visit me in Richmond Barracks Garden if you'd like to come and visit. I run workshops, I give talks, and of course there's the beds in the community garden. So if there are some available, then you are very welcome to come and join in. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Polly. What a wonderful contribution, talking about the work that's being done in the Richmond Barracks community gardens and showing, you know, that there isn't so much difference between growing in urban spaces and growing in rural spaces. So I'd now like to introduce Joanne Butler, who is a member of Talamh Beo and also Climate Action Officer at Donegal Local Development. Joanne runs a small organic farm in Donegal called Our Organic Gardens with her husband Milo. Since 2013, Joanne has been facilitating horticulture and community garden classes with community groups aided by the ETB and local authority. Through her teaching, she has worked with community gardens throughout County Donegal, and her work has won many awards. During COVID, Joanne's course, Grow Your Own with Us, reached over 700 online participants from her potting shed in Donegal and beyond, while also getting involved in the setup of environmental projects such as Seed IT Union and an EIP soil biodiversity and enhancement project with Talamh Beo. Joanne had also worked with Donegal Changemakers and is now Climate Action Officer with Donegal Local Development Company, coordinating the Community Garden Network, the Donegal Food Response Network, and other climate action projects. Joanne also recently completed the QQI Level 7 Community Work in a Changing Ireland Feminist Climate Justice course with the National Women's Council and Feminist Communities for Climate Justice. So she does just 1 or 2 things, as you can see. So Joanne, I'll hand the floor over to you.
All right, thank you, Vanessa. Can you hear me okay? All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody. So that was a great introduction. I think that would took away 2 minutes of what I had to say there, but I suppose, yeah, my relationship with food began about 20 years ago when I moved from Derry to Donegal. Before that, I never really thought about food or where it came from. But I suppose when I moved into the rural area, I began to look around me. And while I was seeing lots of green, I wasn't seeing lots of food. So the very beginning of this journey, I didn't know what I was doing at all. I threw myself into growing my own food after getting a little help from an old farmer who showed me a thing or two about the Garda Hort cabbage. From there, I started to work in my local community garden, and there I was just sharing knowledge, learning new skills, and having a good chat over a cuppa. And the conversations that I had over the years with people about food went from stories from the past of them growing food as children and reminiscing over the variety and flavors long forgotten, and to old skills that have died away, that may have memories of hard graft on the land, but they also have memories of laughter and community spirit working together, bringing home the harvest. So over the years, I've worked in community gardens, like Vanessa said, and gardening projects around the country with the National Community Gardens Ireland, and helping other groups to develop their skills of growing food. I developed a passion for bringing people together to create transformative change within communities and tackling such issues now that we can see as food waste, plastic waste, and also the more increasing food poverty in our communities. Next slide there. So jump forward to almost the present day when I took the skills of growing food into my community that I developed in the community gardens, and I brought them home to the 4-acre small holding that I started with my husband and my children in 2013. And here, like Vanessa mentioned, we grow food for the family, but we've also developed it into an educational garden, growing organic vegetables, fruit and people in the heart of the Donegal Gaeltacht. And since 2016, we have had a lot of community groups and individuals coming to events and workshops to see what we do. And we've had conversations again about food, of course, how it is growing and how we maintain and develop our home and the land with permaculture ethics and principles. So a large amount of what we grow now goes towards the food offerings in our workshops, and then the surplus then goes back into the local community. We've also been able to take part in exciting projects such as the community seed saving projects. And in 2022, we worked with Talamh Beo and we were engaged in the Soil Biodiversity Project, which involved 16 lighthouse farms across Ireland embarking on a year-long educational course, which was just amazing and so empowering for us as community farmers. Next slide. So during COVID, I also dipped my toe. Sorry, just back a slide there, I think. Just there, yeah. During COVID, I also dipped my toe into the online community. I reached out to over 700 individuals from as far away as Inisheer in County Galway to backyard growers in Germany and France. And in this online community, we discussed again where our food comes from, how we shop in our local community, how we grow in today's climate, and how we plan to share the harvest with the communities and seed save for the future. Next slide. And so jumping again now to my current role, not entirely away from community gardens, but I still coordinate the community garden network, but I also now work with the Donegal Food Response Network, and specifically a project called the Growers Project, which was funded through Food Cloud and the Department of Agriculture. So the Donegal Food Response Network itself was established during COVID when DLDC identified a need to better support the community and voluntary organisations that was mobilised to support more vulnerable members of the community. And of course, now since the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, there has been a significant increase in the number of people and families experiencing food insecurity in Donegal. The Food Response Network and DLDC have become a vital support for these network voluntary organisations who do work still on the front line in their local communities. So the network is made up of 21 community and voluntary organisations who are geographically spread across all of the county. And even in 2023, the Food Response Network members have confirmed the request for food has increased substantially. On an average week here in Donegal, we have 646 plus families who are receiving support from member organisations by way of food parcels or vouchers. And this food is not always fresh, local or nutritious. The number also increases in the run up to Christmas and back to school. Next slide there. So the Growers Project itself was brought to DLDC by Food Cloud, and the project involved addressing slowing down the food waste issues by gleaning food from local farms, collecting it by third-party logistics and transporting it to Food Cloud warehouse, where the pallets were then collected and delivered to DLDC in Donegal, who we then sorted and redistributed it, the produce over 2 days to the members. And most important, it was a way of getting fresh, nutritious and local food out to the community. As you can imagine, this initiative took a lot of planning and identifying the location for the hub, food safety responsibilities, volunteer staff coordination, and then onward distribution and delivery plans. Next slide. So by redistributing this food, we redistributed, over 23,000 kilos over 6 months of this project. And that would otherwise have gone unharvested or been wasted. And the programme reduced food waste and avoided approximately 57,500 kilos of carbon emissions. So it also helped to promote environmental sustainability, and it aligned with our efforts to combat climate change at a community level. And the participation also of the 5 growers in this pilot allowed them to recover costs through redistribution. And this, in a small way, we feel supported the local growers and the local economy, and also perhaps provided incentives for others to engage in similar practices. And with this project itself, we felt that redistributing produce locally created a sense of community, addressing food insecurity and ensuring that fresh, locally grown produce reaches people in need. However, we do know that there's still more to be done. While we recognise the need for food banks and food response as an important safety net for individuals and families facing immediate hunger, we also see the existence of food banks indicating that there are gaps in the social, economic and food systems that lead to the insecurity in the first place. And we have identified the need for wraparound services to include comprehensive, holistic support that goes beyond simply providing the food, and for the food to be, of course, fresh, chemical-free, affordable and local. Next slide there. So just an idea that we've got forming is a community-based solution, and coming from my learnings of the climate justice course, looking at all the intersections rather than the isolated issues, we've come up with the kind of plans to create a more sustainable, inclusive and equal system that benefits the entire community. So this would be a community food hub, not unlike the food hubs proposed in the local food work policy framework by Talamh Beo, where we can provide not only locally grown food, but we can also go a step beyond that, incorporating community education spaces, growing and cooking food by the community for the community. And this would obviously be in its inception phase, but we would hope that with adequate funding and support, we will be able to not only continue our work with the Food Response Network, with Food Cloud and other stakeholders, but we hope to bring the community along with us. So that's the end of my bit. So thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Joanne, for such an incredible presentation and talking about all of the work that you do. So I'll now move us on to our final speaker, who is Janet Power. Janet has been running an organic market garden with her partner Jenny for the past 8 years. Their 3-acre farm, of which half acre is under vegetable production, is located in Bunclody on the Carlow-Wexford border. They specialise in salads and leafy veg, which they sell through retail outlets and restaurants across Wexford. Janet joined Talamh Beo in 2023 to connect with a community of fellow land workers committed to shaping the future of the Irish food system. Janet believes in a food system that benefits nature, community, and people together. So Janet, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much, Vanessa, for the introduction. So I'd like to spend a few minutes talking to you about the Talamh Beo Local Food Policy Framework. If we could go on. There we go, perfect. So I'm going to start off with reiterating the position of Talamh Beo on food systems. We want everyone in Ireland to have access to high quality, locally produced food, and for the farmers to earn a fair living from providing that food to their communities. We'll go on to the next slide there. So why are local food producers important? In Talamh Beo, we understand local food producers are the cornerstone of a thriving food system. Local food producers run low input, non-intensive, high nature value farms, growing a wide range of crops or running small diverse herds, typically with native breeds. Additionally, by virtue of being local, transport emissions are reduced or even in some cases eliminated. And from a community perspective, we offer the opportunity to gather around food hubs, markets, farm shops. There are, of course, the health benefits. And ultimately, both in a rural and an urban setting, societies benefit economically and socially from having local food. But we do face distinct challenges. And really what this comes down to is our global, or in our context, an EU-derived policy of cheap food. The Common Agricultural Policy Framework is designed to support an import-export commodity model. So essentially, farmers receive area-based payments and subsidies as opposed to being awarded on the quality of what you produce. The CAP, therefore, by design, does not serve or support short supply chain. Local food producers are therefore then at a competitive disadvantage against cheap food imports. So in Talamh Beo, what we want to do is provide solutions to correct this competitive disadvantage. And we want also for the many diverse benefits that I outlined to be recognised and rewarded. We can go on to the next slide. So how do we propose to do this, to create this local food system which serves society and the producers also? First and foremost, the framework calls for the establishment of a local food producer status. So in order to achieve this status, the following criteria must be met: that you're dedicated to local food production and that this is your primary economic activity. Local is defined, or we defined in Talamh Beo, we define local as being the food produced within the island of Ireland, but we also support shorter supply chains also. And additionally, and it's not necessarily implied in the title of a local food producer, but is certainly within the ethos and values of Talamh Beo, that you're committed to agroecological farming practices. And just a little bit of an explainer on what agroecology is. Agroecology is a system of farming based on the understanding that food systems are localized. It's in the same way that plants are localized and seeds are localized and climate is localized. So therefore, a one-size-fits-all approach does not work. Agroecology recognizes communities and people and place in the sphere of food production. We can go on there. Now, I'll just go and take a look at the actions and supports that are outlined within our framework. First and foremost, income supports. Most local food producers are earning well below the average industrial wage. Everyone knows it's hard work and it's long hours. And that's not dissimilar to other small business owners. But uniquely in food production, we have the vulnerability of factors that are outside our control, namely the weather. So this year we had another really wet, cold summer. It sets back grass growth. It sets back ripening. There's more pests, there's more diseases. It basically, consecutive summers like this can put you into a mode where like you're suddenly economically unsustainable. We've already stated the multiple benefits that we bring to our communities and society at large. So what we require is additional financial supports in order so that we can secure this livelihood and we continue to do what we do. So what we're talking about is direct payments that would be linked to sales. Essentially, that's 50% match funding capped at 15,000. So for example, if you produce 30,000 euros worth of food in a given year, that you will receive 15,000 payment, and it's capped at that. That money could actually make or break a business if you're involved in food production. Another challenge within food production is labour. So the solution that we propose there is that the adoption of a farm bridge, which is similar to the job bridge scheme that the government introduced a number of years ago. Excuse me. And additionally, a government-funded apprenticeship scheme. So in terms of access to market, what we propose is the establishment of food hubs, which would serve as a place to exchange goods, education, support much needed public procurement information, and generally supporting community building. And it's a little bit like what Joanne shared there in her presentation. So it's also really important that healthy local food is equitable and available to all. And so we propose a local food credit, which will be made available to social welfare recipients and lower income groups. And this food credit would be used exclusively for the procurement of locally produced food. Finally, on the issue of land, like this is something that is a real blocker for new entrants into food production. And very often motivated young people, and often women in particular here, are at a distinct disadvantage. So Talamh Beo structure is based on working groups. So what I'm talking about here is within the remit of the local food group, but also we have a separate working group looking at land use where we explore this issue a little bit in further detail. So we can go on to the next slide there. So in conclusion, Talamh Beo advocates that local food producers are the backbone of a thriving local food system. Equally vital is an informed, engaged community that values and demands access to nutritious, locally produced food. This framework, we believe, lays out the pathway to create and sustain such a system, and we welcome engagement with all citizens and agencies who support this aim. So again, I invite you to join Talamh Beo and engage in Talamh Beo, through which you may join our local food working group. And this year we launched a campaign around this issue of local food, and this campaign will run into the next year as well, which will culminate in a large public gathering. And I think Mary alluded to it earlier, that we just wanted to share with you on a kind of a positive note that there was a development this week whereby the Minister Hackett launched a funding initiative to support a short supply chain. So essentially the package covers 5 themes, and the themes in brief are developing premium sustainable markets, encouraging collaboration among stakeholders, supporting on-farm diversification, encouraging farmers markets, farm shops through local authorities, and the development of community gardens, allotments, and urban orchards. So it's an interesting scheme, it's an interesting package. It actually covers an awful lot of what we've been looking for. I think it's probably the result of a lot of years' work where people have been progressing this cause for, you know, in promoting and showing the benefits of local food. So what we have now is ultimately an opportunity to take the money and do something good with it, because, you know, maybe this is quite timely to have the webinar at this time, because we're here congregating on this issue, that we can go back into our various groups and networks, including the Feminist Communities for Local Food Group, the Talamh Beo Local Food Group, and come up with some projects where we can find ways to really deliver solutions to enhance our local food systems. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Janet, for your incredible presentation, and also for tying it to a real spark of opportunity for all of us here in this webinar, not just in this room, but in the virtual space that we're all inhabiting. So I'll hand back over to Colette.
Fine. So at this point, if I ask, so yourselves next to me, if you want to put on the camera of that laptop, and then for Janet, if you want to pop on your cameras as well, as we head into the questions and answers section. Yeah, thanks. It was like, what is it called? We are going to answer some of the questions that have came into the chat. So, Polly, we've one for yourself here. Polly, what is your top tip for someone afraid of killing plants who says they don't have green fingers? If you want to, yeah,
Okay.
I've got the speaker on.
So my top tip is to think about how we evolved as human beings. The fact that our eyes themselves are grown to recognize fruits and vegetables that are ripe. So we are very connected to the living world, to the plant kingdom and the rest of the animal kingdom. But try not to be afraid and treat it as an adventure. Have a look into what kind of soil you're growing into, inform yourself as to the climatic conditions, and just build up your knowledge of the plot that you're growing in. So then that would inform your choices of what plants or seeds you're sowing. And enjoy it and remember why you're doing it, because I think the most important thing is to do things because they give us pleasure. So try to remember that pleasure and feel that when you're doing the action.
Thanks a million, Polly. I'm just going to go in. So we've one in here from Mary, and it is, how do we promote eating locally and seasonally when the market is flooded with imported, out of season food? Also, the vegetarian, vegan food business seems to be a particular culprit, selling a lot of highly processed food. Another point I would like to mention is the fitness business, which also seems to have a lot of highly processed and imported foods. People have to realise that they need to pay food producers fairly for good quality local food. That's all your bugbears. And I think a lot of us can share those with you. But I think, Janet, would you be available to come in on that one if you wanted to unmute, and I'll mute myself?
Sure. I suppose it's the crux of what we're talking about here today as well. How do we get, how do we promote this whole cause? How do we make, like what I'm saying from the Talamh Beo perspective, we want the people to demand this food. So how do we get to that position? There's no quick answer for that. But ultimately, it's kind of a culmination of all the things that we're talking about. It's about connecting people talking about this, people drawing, like a lot of what Joanne said in her presentation. It's so community based, even during COVID, they're being able to deliver presentation or training to a diverse audience online. That's still in itself a community, but it's sort of like, I don't know, it's a funny one, because intrinsically we already have this knowledge. We know that good, healthy, locally grown food is what we need to be eating. Really what we're being bombarded with is images of convenient, unnutritious food, which is distracting us from maybe the actual knowledge we have. So a combination of people growing some food themselves, coming together as in communities, having it available. We need that push. We need that push from the government. We need the public procurement. I'm kind of rambling here, but one thing, the public procurement is really important as well. That's been demonstrated in Denmark to have a huge, huge impact on the uptake of organic. So if we're talking about organic, like we're also talking about, it's the same principle that can be applied to local food and healthy food as well. That was the first part, and I didn't really catch the second part of that.
Yeah, I'll read it.
I think
you've kind of touched a lot of it, like another point, like
yeah.
fitness business and needing to pay food producers fairly for quality local food. But you've kind of touched...
I think you've covered
Yeah.
it all, Janet. I wonder if Joanne wants to comment a little on that as well, just because you referenced her presentation so much there, Janet.
Yeah, I suppose kind of like, my thing is always going back to like the education, the awareness. We're starting to see it come back into schools a little bit, but it's been very slow to get there. And it's just that, like, we are bombarded with social media, these days, with health and promotion, and everywhere you look, it's kind of like, I agree with everything that lady said. So it's very hard to kind of make that call. It is a systemic change that we need to start seeing before that, we start to feel it from the non-converted people, to see them kind of like making choices with more awareness. But hopefully the lights are switching on, and people are showing up, becoming more aware.
Absolutely, and thank you, Joanne. I'll keep going. We've got a few questions flowing in here, so actually another for you, Janet. Could public procurement, I know you touched on procurement there, of farm produce, example for hospitals, schools, public sector canteens, be another support for local food systems? And if anyone else wants to come in, yeah, please do.
Yeah, like, I mean, as I said, it's been demonstrated in other European countries that this is the way to mainstream foods. Like we have we have a great opportunity at the moment. We have that school meals being rolled out across the country. It would be lovely. It's great to see that there is hot meals available to kids, but there's a link missing, or there's an opportunity, to put it another way. to localize that system. And therefore you'll have kids who are eating hot meals that are coming from farms in their area, farms that they can visit. You know, it's a complete cycle of awareness and knowledge. Like, that's very important in terms of mainstreaming. But it's like public procurement cannot be it can't be underestimated as a solution to mainstreaming local food.
Thank you, Janet. I've one here for Mary. You're in the room with me. Why women and food? What motivated Talamh Beo Women to look at food?
Thank you for that. Well, women are the caregivers mainly. And, you know, when you have a baby, you want to give the baby the best nourishment you can, apart from breast milk, you know, food. So you would want to give your baby organic food if possible. You certainly don't want chemical loaded food. And then, so women are caregivers. Food, everybody needs food, so that's important. Some people are more concerned about the food they eat than others. Some people can only afford to eat certain foods, you know. But then networking. There's so much in food and women. There's such a big connection there. And then if all the connections, food is the common denominator. And if groups and networks can get together on food, well, then we've got strength. So it's something that affects us all. Food is something that can unite us as well. And food is a great starting point.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree with that. Thank you, Joanne, or thank you, Mary. Sorry, I'm looking at my next question. Joanne, it's at yourself. Someone has asked, at the local level, how do you get the buy-in from the community, and how I know that training education piece is having an impact? If you want to come in.
Yeah, like I suppose just keep on keeping on. Community development work, it's been, you know, you do it because you want to see that change in your community. And you get people involved. You find out who is your key players in your community, and people that want to see a change. I suppose obviously bringing valuable learning, valuable training that people want to be part of. And then, you know, just working through that as a process, like with the local development company that I work with, Donegal Local Development Company. We would do a lot of work and getting that kind of like to that stage for people, and we know that it's having an impact then from quantitative reports that we would do up, and just seeing the people show up again, you know, time and time again. It's not always easy to run community gardens because, like, the weather this year has been shocking. There's almost 30 community gardens in Donegal, and a lot of them had struggled this year. So it's you know, that's where the pressures are. But it is just about kind of like working around that, and hoping that you've got that impact. But we've all seen it during COVID. Lots of people turn to their gardens, lots of people turn to growing food, and that's where you start to hope that the impact is there, and it is achievable.
Thanks so much, Joanne. I am a bit conscious of the time, but I'll try to pick some, and in the post-event communication we can maybe try and address some of the others, but a lot of it's been covered so far. So one question here is, what would you consider to be the main policy barriers to progressing local food supply and access? Are there any specific policies that are particularly problematic? And that can go to really anyone on the floor, but you know, I know, Janet, you were talking about policy as well, but Joanne, if you want to come in, Mary, Polly, Vanessa, myself. But maybe Janet, do you want to kick us off?
I suppose, like, and in Talamh Beo, we're more looking at the solutions rather than the barriers. So I'm not possibly well placed to kind of pinpoint a particular policy barrier. Yeah, I think, like, you know, we do deliberately try and keep on a solution type kind of territory. So I mean, like, all I can do is endorse, you know, what I was saying about public procurement. lobbying your politicians in order for you to develop from we're a grassroots organization, so that's where our focus is lying.
No, absolutely. Anybody else want to come in? Okay. And then I suppose I'd squeeze in a final one. So just, yeah, so I can go in on this one. Are there any seed patents that prevent me from personally using seeds from purchased produce to start a food garden? For the future of policy, should I be worried about the emerging trend of attempting to modify plant genetics so that seeds from produce cannot viably be planted and then in brackets in specific large companies that perceive the seeds in their sole produce as corporate intellectual property? So Joanne, maybe.
It's a big one. What I would always, promote kind of like going with your local seed banks. I suppose the question there is like saving seed from produce that you've purchased, and the chances there that you'll be buying that produce maybe is F1, so saving seed from that probably not a great idea. So open pollinated seeds, I think it's a large question to fit into maybe a few minutes. So but no, I would always like Irish seed savers, brown envelope seeds and things like that to get your seeds from if you're going to start saving seeds. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well, I think so I think on that note, we're going to need to wrap up.
We have so many questions from you guys. So like, as Colette said, we will try maybe collect the ones that we still have open here and put them, like maybe assign them or spread them amongst the speakers and have them in the post-event piece that we'll mail out to you. But we will have to close. We're 60 seconds from time and we don't want to keep you too late, I suppose. So I'll hand over to Colette to finish us off there.
Yeah, so again, yeah, thank you all for attending today, for your input, and let this not be the end. And please continue to engage with us and Talamh Beo and this local food policy group. Oh yeah, we should share the screen perhaps. Yeah, so yeah, some follow-up. But I suppose just to highlight again, the vast majority of women farmers are small farmers, and they play an important role in producing locally grown, chemical-free food, which is good for our people and for our planet. So currently, many small farmers face significant barriers in accessing these financial supports that they truly need. And so we're calling for urgent, targeted funding schemes that recognise the specific issues experienced by women farmers and to ensure the sustainability of small farms. So they must be supported to diversify their farming, assist in restoring climate and biodiversity land use, and to develop climate sustainable farm practices and food production. Access to food is not only a climate issue, it is a political and equality issue. A healthy, locally grown, chemical-free food needs to be accessible and affordable to all. And to make this reality, we need investment from government in local small farmers and supports to ensure that they can produce chemical-free food for all of us in the local community. So on that note, some follow-up actions: get involved in our network, join the local food working group, become a member of Talamh Beo, become our friends, let this not be the end, and get in touch. Some upcoming events for Talamh Beo themselves: Ploughing Championships, Community or Cork Environmental Forum World Food Day, Environmental Conference, and then Burren Wintrinch Weekend. And we'll be sending these afterwards. So hopefully you'll see some of us at those events, and then anything we have upcoming will include as well. So really, thanks a million to all of our speakers or contributors to Talamh Beo Women. It's been an absolute joy. To my partner in climate justice, Vanessa, and to Roisin in the background there, helping out with recording and whatnot, and Bridgie. Yeah, so Sinead, gur míle maith agah agus ihuai. Slán. Slán. Slán.